This is March 20th, 2009, and we are interviewing Frank English in his Guilderland home. He served in the United States Marines from June 3rd, 1952 through June 3rd, 1960. This interview is being conducted by Kenneth and June Hunter at 3 p.m. Please tell us your full name and when and where you were born.
Full name is Frank C. English. C stands for Carter. And I was originally born in Jacksonville, Florida in 1935, and the family moved to New York when I was about 3 or 5 years old. Moved to New York City, and that's where I spent the better part of my youth, in the city of New York and Harlem. Grew up.
And what did you do before you entered the service?
Well, I came out of high school. Actually, I quit high school. I was originally a high school dropout. I didn't feel like going to school much, and a lot of guys were joining the Army and everything and whatnot in where I lived, and I decided to join the service. 17, and it's a funny story because I've always wanted to go into the Navy, and I went down to the enlistment office in New York City, down on Broadway, and walked in, and just by chance the Navy office was closed. There was nobody there, so about 3 of us, myself and 2 other friends of mine, we sat on the bench, and this Marine, he came in and asked us if he could help us, and we said, yeah, we want to join the service. He says, okay, come on. And we went upstairs with him, and that's how I got in the Marine Corps. So for all you people out there in the Navy, yeah, I was going to pick the Navy first, but I didn't. It was in 1952, and it was an era where it was either you worked or you went into service. A lot of kids my age and race, we went into the military during that time. Also, there was a time where the military had only been integrated for 4 years. So when we got down to Paris Island and boot camp, it was not bad. It was okay. It was not as hard as some people might have thought it was for us. But we arrived at Paris Island, and the first night there, by the way, we'd heard so much stuff about Paris Island, how rough it was, and the DIs, the drill instructors, how bad it was. Well, we took the Atlantic Coast Line Railroad out of Hoboken, and we got to Yamasee, South Carolina, 2 days later, a day later. They fed us in town, and then they took us out by bus to the island. Well, we got there late at night, and we stayed in tents that night, and we got up the next morning still in civilian clothes, and we went to eat. So we didn't realize that where we were eating was not really the boot camp side, but where all the guys, all the Marines we saw in their utilities and whatnot, they were not boot camp. They had gone through and whatnot. So we said, wow, this is not bad, And another funny thing happened. My first meal in the Marine Corps was SOS. And I'm not going to say what we called it, but it was cream beef on toast. So we called it SOS. For you guys that's in the service, you know what that meant. And we ate breakfast, and they marched us to this long building called the Hygiene Unit. And that's where we met our drill instructors, and all hell broke loose. Well, they went up one side of us and down the other, and we got our indoctrination into Marine boot camp. I went to boot camp for 10 weeks, and of that 10 weeks, it involved learning history of the Marine Corps, marching, weapons, basic weapons. We fired several different weapons, carbine, and the M1, and the pistol, and went through the tear gas tent, and boot camp was hard, but I didn't mind it because I felt I joined, so and it was a Marines, so I had forgotten about the Navy by this time, and the 10 weeks we spent there was a great experience. I met a few guys that I'm still in contact with today. One in particular lives in Pennsylvania, John Wilson. We were in boot camp together, and we still to this day to correspond with each other. I've been down to his house and spent weekends, and he's going to be coming up to visit me shortly. So I made some good friends. Some that I met in boot camp did not make it back from Korea, but that's another story. We graduated from boot camp in August, the last week of August of 52, and we were given a 10-day leave. And so when I came home, boy, that was a big thing for my family. I came home, I'm 17 years old, and I'm in the service, and all the guys in my block, and we lived in Harlem, and all the girls, you know, and we was in summer khakis. We wore, in them days, we wore the summer khakis, the cotton khakis, with the emblems on the collar and on your, we called it something else besides...
a PC.
Yeah, PC. My PC, okay. And it was a fun trip coming home for 10 days. Went back to Paris Island. I was in casual company for about 3 weeks, and then they flew us out to Camp Pendleton, which is the home of the 1st Marine Division. But the 1st Marine Division was already in Korea. But what we went through at Camp Pendleton, I was up in 10th Camp 2, which was a training and replacement command for Korea.
Where is Camp Pendleton?
Camp Pendleton is in Oceanside, California. It's about 100 and some miles south of Los Angeles. And arrived at 10th Camp 2, and immediately I was given mess duty for 30 days. A bunch of us guys had to do mess duty for 30 days, and then after the 30 days we went into the training camp and replacement command.
What time in the day did you have to work the mess duty?
Oh, we get up at 3:30 in the morning to do mess duty, and didn't go to, you know, the last chow was 5, 6 o'clock at night, and we had to clean up. So by the time we got through with everything, it was like 9 o'clock at night. We still had enough time to go on liberty.
What did you have to do for?
Oh, sometimes served it, or worked the chow line. Sometimes work in the galley, help to cook, you know, to cook, and so forth and so on, and had to ride the range, as they call it, to clean the grill. After they cooked, you get a brick with this sandpaper, and we had to what they call ride the range while it was still hot. So it was fun, you know, all the food you could eat, and we still had enough time. We got through with that. We still had enough time if we had got liberty to run into Oceanside or up to L.A. So we had enough time. Stayed in 10th Camp. Stayed in training from September to December. I believe it was, because I know we had to go to cold weather training up at Pickle Meadows, they call it. We call it Cucumber Flats. But we went up to do our cold weather training in preparation to go to Korea, which was, for when I got there, I realized I only had 2 temperatures, cold and hot. I never saw a spring or fall there. And we did our training up at Pickle Meadows, and that was the final phase of training before shipping out to Korea, going to up to Pickle Meadows. When we came back from cold weather training, I believe we got a 72-hour liberty, and that was the coup de grace. We were getting ready to go. We boarded ship. I was in George Company in 10 Camp 2. We went aboard ship in San Diego, and ironically, my son is in the Navy now. He's a chief. That's where he's stationed, in San Diego. We boarded ship in San Diego, and I was on the U.S. MiGs, which was a troop ship. And if anybody have never been across the ocean for 10 days in a troop ship, that's an experience. Let me tell you, that's the experience.
Tell us a little bit about it.
The bunks are like 4 or 5 high, with about that much space in between each bunk. So you're lucky. You don't want to get the real top bunk because the steam pipes are about that far from your face. So you want to get maybe the bunk next to the top, because if the guys on top were seasick, you don't want to be on the bottom. See, so we get aboard ship, and everybody's scrambled, but you sign a compartment. So if you're lucky, I was lucky. I had the 3rd bunk up from the deck, so I was kind of lucky. And the guys, 2 guys above me, no accidents, thank God, for the whole 10 days over. Most of the time we stayed on deck. We went upstairs. We went up topside on deck, and spent a lot of time on the deck, because as we got out of the United States, the weather started getting warmer. It took us anywhere from, we ate standing up, because everything was cooked in big steam kettles on a troop ship. Right from the eggs, everything was like, eggs were always scrambled, potatoes was always mashed potatoes, and there was a lot of carrots, little carrots and peas and mashed potatoes and a lot of hash and a lot of stuff that they could, mix up in those steam kettles. Because, you're feeding something like, what, 1,500, 1,600 more guys going across on a troop ship. There would have to be a lot of guys. We had both Air Force and Army and Marines on the troop ship. We got to Yokohama, Japan, about 9 to 10 days out of San Diego. 9 to 10 days out of San Diego. We got overnight Liberty. So here I am. So you can guess. Here I am, a 17-year-old. Far as I ever been traveling anywhere was between Jacksonville and New York City, and after that, never out of New York City. Here I am in Japan. What a thrill this was, and what an experience. Oh, okay, what an experience. And we had to be back aboard ship at 5:45 the next morning. Well, some of us made it back, some of us didn't. I don't know what happened to some of the guys that didn't make it back.
Was there a procedure you had to go through to leave, to get on board the ship or to leave the ship?
Oh yeah, you had to show a pass to leave the base with Yokohama, and coming back aboard, you had to have the pass was for just 72 hours, and it was limited to how far we could go. We could go like only within a 2-mile range from where the ship was docked.
Now, because it was manned by Navy crew...
No, it wasn't a Navy crew, it was Merchant Marine crew.
Merchant Marine crew. Also, you didn't have to go through the routine of saluting the colors and all?
No, we never did any raising of the colors or retreat or anything the whole 10 days because it was a Merchant Marine crew. It was a Merchant Marine band. It was a regular troop ship. It wasn't like World War II where the Navy took them across. We left Yokohama and we dropped off some Air Force guys there, and then we stopped at Kobe. I think it was Kobe. I'm pretty sure it was Kobe. And then from there we went across to see Japan to Korea. I didn't get Liberty in the second stop because I had the duty. So I didn't get Liberty. I got Liberty the first night in Yokohama. We arrived in Korea, I believe it was about the last week, the last few days of December. And immediately, as you got closer to Korea, you could smell it. Okay, because they used human waste in the rice paddies. So you had this funny odor coming from the landscape as you got closer. It wasn't too pungent, but it was different than what we were used to. We landed in Incheon, which is famous for when the first Marines landed there in 1950. We landed in Incheon, and I remember as we came down the gangplank to go ashore, you had to say your name, rank, and your serial number, and they checked it off. And they gave us a pocket knife, and in that pocket knife was a spoon, a knife, a little scissors, a little screwdriver, when I call it a combi tool. And I remember that, I thought that was strange. Why couldn't they give us that aboard ship? We didn't have any weapons. We had rifles. We had our rifles with us. No ammo or anything of that nature. And they took us that night. We went up to Ashcombe City. And hadn't heard a weapon fired in anger at its time yet. All the fighting was north of us. And it was cold. It was very cold. But we were just off the ship, so the cold didn't affect us that much. And our winter gear was fairly okay. The winter gear consisted of a parker, a t-shirt, sweater, alpaca vest, field jacket, and your parker, and you had on a pair of the winter green trousers, long johns, water barrier type pants with suspenders, and mittens with the trigger finger, and what we call a Mongolian piss cutter. It had the line had. Well, that was all that was to come later. But right now we just had the parker and the Mickey Mouse boots, the thermal boots. We stayed in Ashcombe City, and then we got aboard the trains the next morning, and looked like it took forever to get up to Munson railhead.
Now, was this a train that we'd be expected to ride over here? Was it primitive?
This is old Japanese railroad train, because the Japanese held Korea for a long time, so a lot of the trains and things that the Koreans were using were Japanese. I mean, the big wheels, and I mean, they went through the tunnel. We went through tunnels. There was no windows on the side, so all the soot came in the window. And every time we got to a bridge or anything, they stopped to inspect the bridge. From what I understand later, because of the guerrilla activity in that area. Anyway, we get up to Munson Railhead, and it was there where I believe they assigned everybody to their different outfits. And I forget how many Marines it was. It must have been it was a few hundred Marines, because we were the 28th draft, and we were relieving. The Marines we were leaving had been there 14 months, and were leaving. And I believe we were the 28th draft. And they called out our names and told us where we were going. And by the time they got to my name, they called out my name and they says, English, yes. You're going to the 1st Combat Service Group. Combat Service Group, I didn't know what that was about. Over there, so I got over there. Well, 1st Combat Service Group is an outfit that supplies and back up to the guys on the line. We set up the laundry, we set up the showers when they come off the line, maintain, clothes and whatnot and everything. And I did that for a while, and I think, if I can remember correctly, I stayed in 1st Combat Service Group about 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere around here. Then they transferred me to Howe Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, which was a rifle.
Before we get into that, what kind of sleeping arrangements did you have there? What kind of meals?
Oh, while I was in 1st Combat Service Group, the sleeping arrangements were beautiful. We had tents, we had stoves in them. We went to a regular chow line. We had our own cooks. We did not live the harsh way the guys on the line did, per se, unless we were up there working with them, right up there with them, taking supplies and stuff to them. But we had showers. I mean, you could shower every morning. You could, food was plentiful. The living conditions, I think it was 6 guys to a tent, and we had a potbelly stove in there, and so it was good duty. It didn't last long though. They had a big, I believe what happens comes back. They had a big push. The Chinese had a big offensive, and they needed replacements up on the line because of casualties. And so they went about the different rear echelon areas, taking Marines, and because every Marine basically is a rifleman. That's the first thing you learn. Even though you may go to be a cook or a truck driver, you are a basic rifleman. So at any time you may be called upon to do infantry duty. That's how we're trained. And they picked, out of 1st Combat Service Group, they picked about 20 of us. And I was still a private at the time. And they put us on they told us we was going, they didn't tell us where exactly we were going. They put us on the trucks up at, we went over to a truck depot. Trucks came down. And if I remember correctly, we went to, it took us over to the division we got on trucks and started up. Well, when you went across the MGM River, which separated, north of the MGM River, as we were going across the MGM River, we was going across, I think it was X-Ray Bridge or Freedom Bridge. I think it was X-Ray Bridge. Freedom Bridge came later when the POWs was repatriated, I believe. I think we was going across X-Ray Bridge, and I saw this big sign, and it said, any civilians caught north of this point, we will be considered combatants. So I said, oh, okay, we're getting close, And we stopped on the side of the road before we finished going up. This was daytime. And not far from where we stopped, there was a battery of artillery. And from where I was stationed with 1st Combat Service Group, if you look towards the north, occasionally you would see lights flashing, but nothing really serious. We were that far back. But there was a battery of artillery over to our right, and we were sitting there, and I smoked cigarettes then. We were sitting there smoking and whatnot. And all of a sudden they fired a mission, and they went off, and people went everywhere. That's the first time I had heard shots fired in anger, was at that time. Well, we got up to, I found out later, all of us was going to 1st Marines, because they had been hit very heavy on certain hills there, and 5th Marines had been hit. 1st and 7th Marines, I think, had been hit very hard. But we were all going to 1st Marines, and we got up to what they call regiment. The way they do it in Marine Corps, you have division, regiment, battalion, and company. That's how the CPs run. So we got up to regimental CP, and from there they told us what was going to how company, item company, George company, whatever. And I went to how company, and when I got there, they took us up by Amtrak, by an APC, armored personnel carrier. And as we were going up the road, the driver says, "Keep your heads down. The Chinese control the 2 hills on the left." And we got through without being shot at. By this time, I hadn't been shot at before, and I hadn't been on the incoming yet. And but I could hear the noise. You could hear the noise. You could hear the artillery going off occasionally, and the thump of a mortar going on out of a tube. Well, we got up to Howe Company CP, and they assigned me to. I think I was in the 2nd Platoon, 1st Squad, and right away I got there. I had an M1 in my hand, which was the rifle, the weapon of the infantry at the time. And the platoon sergeant looked at me. He says, "Give me that M1." No, he said, "Hand me your piece." And I gave it to him, and they handed me a BAR, which is the Browning automatic rifle. And he said, "Clean it, it's yours." So right away I became a BAR man.
In comparison with the M1, how heavy was the BAR?
20.5 pounds.
And what about the ammunition?
M1 was 9.5. M1 was 9.5, the BAR was 20.5. And you had a clip of 20 rounds, a magazine of the 20 rounds. Plus you had a belt you carried with 10 magazines with 20 rounds. But I had what they call an A-bar man. He was the Marines do what they call fire teams. The Marine squad at that time was 13 men, 3 fire teams of 4, and a squad leader. And in each fire team there's a BAR. So that gives you a lot of automatic fire in the squad. So you figure 3 squads to a platoon, that's 9 BAR. So that was a lot of firepower. And you always had a Marine to carry extra BAR ammunition for you at that time. I don't know how they do it today. But that's how I became a barman. And so I cleaned it. I broke it down as best I could because I didn't remember all of it, because the only time I had fired a BAR prior to that was when I was going through training in Camp Pendleton. Anyway, that night, they put me in the squad, but I wasn't involved in any of the activity up there yet. Well, that night we got my first shelling that night, my first taste of incoming. And that frightened the hell out of me. I have never been so frightened in my life. As I couldn't go nowhere, nowhere to go, and we wasn't on the outpost. I was still on the MLR, which is the main line of resistance. In front of the MLR, there's outposts, but they didn't have me on any outposts yet. None of the new guys they put on outposts yet. They put us with guys that night that had been up there for a while. And we got shelled that night, and that was the first time that I had been in incoming. And I think it lasted for about 45 minutes to an hour. And that's when, after it happened, I realized some guys had got hit. And I saw my first
casualties?
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, I saw my first, you know, casualties. Excuse me. We, you know, they call us to help, you know, take the wounded and the other guys, you know, back to on the reverse slope of the hill. Korea was very different than I think any place people can think of at that time. I mean, I've seen pictures of it now, and I've talked to guys who've gone back, and my wife and I said one day, well, I hope to make a trip back and see it. It was a different place then. It was very hard. It was very rough, especially up on the line. It was a very unfriendly place, you know. We laughed and joked a lot, you know. We amongst ourselves, we found you'd be surprised the humor that you can find in wartime. I mean, the funny things we used to laugh at of how guys are trying to relieve themselves and the shells come and they're running around trying to pull their pants up and that kind of stuff, you know, and different things, you know. But it was a very hostile climate. Cold was. We didn't have the cold so bad as the guys that was, I think, up at the reservoir, Chosen Reservoir was. We were able. The line had been so established at the time that we were able to have little small stoves in the bunkers. So we managed, in a lot of ways, to be more comfortable than the Marines before us. Back in the 50s, when the 1st Marine Division was up in the reservoir, the line was more established, more dug in. I believe we had the Australians was on our left flank. We had some Australians on our left flank, and the funny story there, they get a rum ration, you know, the old British custom of the rum ration, and a couple of Marines happened one day to stumble across this keg of rum, you know. So, so a few guys and a couple of squads had a good time that night, and the Australians come over the next morning. And they were talking about somebody had been over there. We don't know what happened, you know. We don't know what's going on, but I don't know if they ever got their rum keg back. But it was a funny thing, and but again, we managed to really cope with what was going on. My real memory of Korea is it was not a pretty place to be. It was not a pretty place. The devastation and the suffering that went on, even among the civilians. And I remember. I'm a volunteer firefighter, and I remember when 9/11 happened, I went down to Ground Zero with the rescue team, and that reminded me of Korea. I told my wife, I says, it reminded me of Korea, looking at the rubble down there with World Trade Center when I got down there that night of 9/11. But we managed to take humor to, you know, especially when we be in reserve, we'd come off the line. And you be in reserve, you get cleaned up, and you get new utilities and good hot chow. Most of the time, we ate sea rations while on the line, and sometimes you went without you were able to maybe wash up because you could heat water in your steel helmet, you know, your steel pot, and maybe wash up the vital areas. But as far as taking a good bath, it was hard for like sometimes 4 or 5 weeks at a time, 3 weeks at a time. So when we got back in the reserve, it was a good thing to get a shower and good, clean, fresh clothes. And this is where 1st Combat Service Group came in. That's what we used to do when I was in 1st Combat Service Group. Supply the guys with clean, fresh utilities and whatnot. Now I was on the receiving end. And I met a few guys. I'm sorry to say that none of the guys I met in Korea, other than the guys that went over with me, I'm still in contact with. But I'm still in contact, like I say, with John Wilson. And he also went to Korea at the same time we did. Left Korea in '54. Well, I was there for the signing of the armistice, and that was
Now, before you go on to the signing of the armistice and all, a couple of things to bring some points out about what were C rations like? What were they made of?
Oh, okay. Well, you got to remember, Korea was only 5 years after World War II, so a lot of the ammunition that we used, a lot of the weapons that we used, a lot of the C rations we had were from World War II. C rations consisted of, was a box we got, it was a box about yay big, and in there was 3 meals in cans, little cans about like that. Sausage patties, franks and beans, spaghetti and meatballs. Then a little can of dessert, maybe fruit cocktail with peaches, you know, applesauce. There was a pack of cigarettes. There was a roll of toilet paper about that fat around. Soluble coffee. Now, soluble coffee, to me, would eat the fillings out of a horse. But, you know, you broke it up. And then they had this bar of chocolate, which was hard as a brick, and this little can of biscuits and jam. Okay. See, the Army had K rations. K rations came in the big cans of string beans and stuff like that. So any chance we got, if we could snitch some or, you know, trade something for the Army guys, we could K rations. But we had C rations. But it was very compact. And my favorite meal in C rations was the franks and beans. And it came with also with the water, the purification pills, 2 little packets of chiclets, and you had your 3 meals. You had your breakfast, and you know, and you got used to it because you have a little sterno. They have a little sterno stove, and you light the sterno, and you punch a couple of holes in the can and put it right on the sterno stove. That would heat it up. And you make your coffee. I mean, we laid out a feast just about. You look like you were laying out a feast. If you really got round to the C rations, you could make a meal out of them, you know.
How did you open these cans?
We have what we call a John Wayne. I still got mine on my keys, tell you the truth. It's a can opener. It's about like that, with a little hook comes out. And I mean, it really, mine still works. I still got my original one I ever had. And you open them up. And you'd open up the can enough where you peel back the top and make a handle. And then everybody kept a spoon, you know, because the spoon could cut and dip and everything. So you got your spoon and you I mean, it's like, after a while, it got to be a feast. The worst thing in C rations was the sausage patties. You don't want to eat them, you know. But in a pinch, if you didn't have anything, you'd eat the sausage patties. But you had to look at the little biscuits with the little jam. I mean, it was a really a thing. Fruit cocktail, peaches, you know. And then occasionally the trucks would come up with a hot meal. Occasionally, I mean, it's not something that you saw. We didn't get a hot meal every day. Sometimes we went 2-3 weeks without a real cooked meal. So we ate C rations. I mean, guys lost a little weight, but you stayed nourished. You know, the food was nourishable. You know, so when you did get back into reserve, they really fed you. And it was a going joke all the time that when you get up in the morning and went down to the chow tent, if they had steak and eggs, that's the sign you're getting ready to. That was the clue, you know. Us Marines got to go, you know. You know? But I remember when the signing of the ceasefire, it was I think it was a Thursday morning, July the 27th. I know it was July the 27th, and I think it was a Thursday morning, and we knew that they had been talking peace talks in Panama John. Well, the hill I was on, 111. I was on hill 111, coming up in the end of the war, and where the hill I was on, right off to our left flank was this big beam of light that shot up into the air, and that was Panama John. Okay, and we could not fire in that direction, even if we had somebody between us, and we couldn't fire in that direction. And the Chinese had a hill, I believe, just off to our left, and they would shell us, but we couldn't shell back because they was afraid that a round might fall in Freedom Village into the peace talks. But this beam of light, I'll never forget it, shot straight up in the air, and that was Panjim Jom. And one of the last big battles of the war was the Chinese sent anywhere between, I think, 10 to 15,000 men against the 1st Marines on what was called, I think, no, the 7th Marines, I believe, and 1st Marines. And I was on Hill 111, and another hill was called Boulder City. and took big casualties for those 2 days. Because I think what happened was the Chinese was trying to get as much as they could, because when the war ended, they made a DMZ. So wherever you was, you moved back 3 miles, and that created the DMZ, which is there today.
And that stands for
Demilitarization zone. And so what happened was they hit us pretty hard for 2 straight days, the 24th and the 25th. No, the 25th and the 26th, I believe. I believe that, yeah. But I remember the morning of the 27th, they said that the word came down that they're going to sign the truce. They're going to sign the ceasefire at 10 a.m. And my platoon lieutenant, I believe it was Ted Lutz, Lieutenant Theodore Lutz, he said, but we're still at war. And it won't go into effect until 10 p.m. that night, 12 hours later. Well, I mean, you could just about feel the thinking of the guys. I'd hate to buy the farm now, you know, which is the term for getting hit or getting killed. I'd hate to buy the farm now, and 12 hours to go. Well, it was a peaceful day. The 27th. I don't remember. Oh yeah, I forgot to bring up a point. That during the time I was in 1st Marines, I also served in 60 Mortars for a while. 60 Mortar platoon for a while. And at the coming up at the end of the war, I was in 60 Mortars, which is what they call the company's artillery, the company commander's artillery. And we fired a few missions that dawn. They thought they saw some people out in the no man's land. And we fired, I think my gun fired about 4 or 5 missions that morning. And we were quiet the rest of the day.
Now, mortars are nothing like the rifles where you can do sighting and so forth. How did you?
The mortars are already registered. The mortars are registered in. We're in a gun pit, and we register the mortars. We shoot out rounds, and the forward observer, he corrects you, writes where you hit, you write it back on the card back at the gun pit. So when they come up and they say fire mission, you have aiming sticks in front of the gun, and you have your center aiming sticks and maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sticks on each side, and they'll say fire mission. What was it? I think it's aiming stick, 3 right. So you turn the gun on that aiming stick, sight on that aiming stick, and that's where your round will go. So the guns are registered, and every gun, I forget how many guns was in I think it was 3 guns, 3 mortars, and they're all registered to cross each other. Okay, they're all registered to cross each other. Well, we had about 3 missions that morning. And they said, okay, they're going to sign the ceasefire at 10 o'clock, but it won't go into effect till 10 that night. It was a peaceful day, very quiet day. Everybody was waiting for the shoe to drop. You know, guys was in the bunkers, in the radio bunkers, listening to the radios, trying to pick up any Chinese activity on the air. The airways was pretty quiet. And then the word came down that a Chinese soldier that got through our line and was coming in our direction. So we were sitting outside the bunker smoking, and they said, they think a Chinese soldier has gotten through and he's heading back this way. So we fanned out a little bit, but nothing materialized out of that. And we went on that night, and that day, and finally that night at 10 o'clock, they shot up star clusters and whatnot, and the Chinese started playing martial music. You could hear it coming over the valley, and you could hear the Chinese says, "Congratulations to the U.S. Marines for a job well done. Congratulations to the UN forces." You know, the usual Chinese propaganda, I guess, propaganda with anybody. And it was strange because nobody slept that night. I don't remember anybody in my mortar section sleeping that night. We stayed up all night, and next day, we were told that we had 3 days to tear down all the bunkers and move back 3 miles from wherever we were. And the Chinese had to do the same thing, and that created the demilitarization zone, the ZMZ. And sure, that war is funny. We were tearing down bunkers, and guy, my gun leader, his name was Vernon Fretas. He's from California. And he said, English. He says, are those Chinese soldiers? And I turned and I look, and here come 3 Chinese soldiers walking up toward us. And we still had our weapons. And what they had done, I believe, if you had an M1, no, we had all our weapons and ammo. And being in Mortars, I had a 45 at the time. And I looked at them. I says, "What's going on?" You know, and they were making some gestures toward us, you know. So I went in the bunker and I told the section sergeant, and he came out. I can't think of his name, and he came out and he said he did like that to them, and they stopped, and they went like that. And he says they want some cigarettes. And then he pulled out some cigarettes out of his pocket. They wanted to trade American cigarettes with Chinese cigarettes. I said, this is crazy. This is crazy. So they had a lot of UN observers going around. A lot of Indians and Swedes, you know, Switzerland people. They were the UN observers, but they were neutral countries during the Korean War. And they, I think India was a neutral country during the war. But I know they had a lot of people who were neutral during the Korean War, became the UN observers. They came up and they had the blue band, and they would tell us that this is okay to do and that's okay to do. And we asked one to come up, and he came up and he spoke Chinese. He talked to them. They wanted to sit and talk. So we sat and talked with them for about 20 minutes to half an hour, and we changed cigarettes with them. Ours didn't taste as good as theirs, but you know, we exchanged cigarettes with them. And I'm thinking, you know, this is weird. This is really strange. You know, at that time I had turned 18, and I'm saying, this is strange that just a couple hours ago, you know, I was mature enough at that time to think, a couple hours ago this man would have killed me, or I would have killed him, and thought nothing of it, you know. Well, we broke down and then we moved back, and something really exciting happened. As we were coming down the road, coming from the lines, there was a photographer standing up on a Jeep, and he took a picture. And that picture came out in the August edition of Life. And in that, it's my squad, it's my gun crew coming off the hill. You can see me in the back and see all the guys. I've got 2 copies I've saved to this day for my kids to and my great-grands to look at. You could actually see me, and it was in Life. It was the August edition of Life in 53 August edition of Life. And you can see us coming off the hill. And we moved back. Well, we moved back across the Jim River, I believe, and immediately began to set up defensive positions on that side of the river. There were reports of Chinese infiltrating through the DMZ, trying to get back what they had been caught. And I remember they allowed us to go swimming. We were able to go fishing and swimming in the Jim River. I remember swimming in the Jim River. And about a week after that, I got R&R in Japan, and they called a few guys out, and I went to Kyoto, Japan for R&R for six days, and remained in Korea, and another winter, and I left Korea in March of 1954.
Now, before we continue from this point, were there occasions when you had entertainment there? What was mail call like? How did they handle pay? What about haircuts, things of that nature?
Well, we'll get back into entertainment. Was mostly USO. I saw Bob Hope. I saw various, entertainers come over in USO. We had movies in the rear. We had movies, and USO would come up. Mail call was almost every day. If you got letters, if you got mail, we didn't have to pay postage if it was sent from Korea to the United States. So we wrote every day. Pay was every 2 weeks, but who took it? I didn't take mine. There was no way to. I mean, we had a PX. So what I usually would take maybe. Now you mind you, I had made PFC by that time, so I'm only making $82 a month, and but I was getting combat pay of $21 extra a month, combat pay. So I would take about maybe $15 pay, and that would buy my cigarettes. They were $1 a carton because they were only 10 cents a pack. And you buy, junk, And my mother and my stepfather were sending me packages, and I remember another little funny story. I remember they sent me a package with about 8 Sundays of the comics from the Sunday papers. The Katzenjammer Kids, things that people don't know about today. The Katzenjammer, was it Little Abner? Was it Joe Palooka? And she sent me this whole box of Bazooka bubble gum. So here's all these guys in my gun section. We're chewing this, we got from home. So, we get packages from home and whatnot. And you got paid. Pay call was every 2 weeks. And when you was up on the line, nobody got paid. You didn't take no pay. But when you came back off the line, pay was there. Those were the good parts, And it got to point. We weren't allowed to eat any Korean food. If you ate any Korean food, you could get a court-martial because of how they, the growth. I don't know if they still do today, but they did in that time. They had what they call honey buckets, and in the rear they had the head, which is marine latrine. They had the head set up, and underneath the head was these 50-gallon drums that would catch everything, and the Koreans would come by and collect it. And
for fertilizer.
And use it for fertilizer. We call them the honey buckets.
Yeah.
And as far as sanitary conditions were concerned, sanitary conditions were okay. We had showers in the rear. We had the head. We take artillery shells and dig holes in the ground, and that would be the urinal. And then you had the regular head. They put a cover over it. But up on the line, it was different. You had to scratch your means out the best way you could. And food was plentiful. Ammunition was plentiful. We never ran out of ammo. I don't ever remember running out of ammo. It was just the weather was harsh at times. Summer times was hot. I think it went from winter to hot. They had the rainy season, which came about like in April to May, somewhere around there. I just rain. Footing was very bad at that time, but it was an experience.
Did you have occasions when you had a mixture of Koreans with your unit, Army? And what about air cover for you?
Oh, we had plenty of air cover. We had 1st Marine Air Wing doing our air cover. And to this day, I say, thank God the Chinese didn't have any air, because we were vulnerable to air. But we had air superiority. We'd watch air strikes come in. We'd have the forward observers call in air strikes come in. We'd watch them strike a hill. And on a couple of occasions, we had to go out and get down pilots. A couple of occasions. Koreans in with us. We didn't have any. We had, at one time, I remember having some the Korean Marines with us. And them guys scared me because they had an axe to grind. It was their country and whatnot, and they were really vicious. We had a platoon of Korean Marines with us for a while, and they had what they call the KSC, Korean Service Corps. They were civilians who did a lot of the labor work, bringing up ammo, taking out the dead, things of that nature. They were they worked very hard. And they would be our stretcher bearers and stuff like that. If we got hit pretty bad, they would have them take the casualties down the hill and stuff like that.
Now, the Marines are known for their bringing back their wounded, their dead.
Oh, yeah.
They have a proud history of that.
Oh, yeah. Plenty of times on patrol, a guy would get hit. We wouldn't leave him. We'd bring him back. Oh, yeah. Don't leave him in the field now. No, it's not good.
Did you have occasion to see what the conditions were like for the Korean people themselves?
Very, very. When I got there, the conditions for the Korean people had improved some by the time I got there. But it was still harsh. I brought back some Korean money. I'm going to show you what it looked like then, that I got when I was in Korea. And I got 2,100 won. And that's what I brought back as a souvenir. But the inflation was like terrible, And I remember we were told not to feed the civilians, because then they would crowd the camps, But being Americans, you know, especially kids. We give food to kids, you know, whatnot. But you had to watch them too, because there was some thievery among them. So you had to keep them. They didn't want them in the camp. They had some Korean, what they call Korean workers, that were allowed into the camp, and they did a lot of the labor work in the camp, helped in the mess hall, you know, helped with the maintenance and whatnot. And they paid those people. I believe those people got paid. But they tried to keep the civilians out of the general population where the Marines were when we came off the line. They put up barbed wire, you know. And, you know, our captain said, you know, the barbed wire is not to keep you guys in, it's just to keep them out, you know, that kind of thing. But we had, they were beginning to get some sort of, you know, comfortable living back by the time I left. You know, things were, I mean, it's improved greatly today from what I see in the papers and the newsreels, but it was still pretty rough for them. It was still pretty rough for them, because I guess what I had realized now is inflation was very high. I gotta tell you the truth, I never saw a dog in Korea. Not one. I don't know why, but, you know, there's old stories, but I never saw one in Korea that time. I think it was harsh. It was very hard for them.
How often did you have an opportunity to change clothing? I'm sure that there were long periods when you wore the same thing and everybody smelled to high heaven.
Well, you didn't smell everybody. Everybody smelled the same, so you didn't notice it after a while. And there was it was old saying that an officer said a long time ago, when you got to Korea, don't worry about smelling, because everybody smells of. And, okay, we weren't allowed to use sweet soap. You didn't use like palm olive or nothing like that. When you did get a chance to wash up, no sweet smelling soap, because the Chinese could smell it. So we washed in this harsh soap that didn't even lather, but you know. But they would tell you, don't chew, you know, not chew, but don't wash, don't use no cologne, don't use no deodorant, don't use sweet smelling soap, especially up on the line. So, and then sometimes you keep the same clothes on, sometimes 2-3 weeks. You know, there was sometimes you were able on the line, you were able to wash out, you know, your skivvies, if you in your helmet. That helmet's a wonderful thing. Man. The helmet's a wonderful thing. Wash out your skivvies and keep your socks dry, clean, those kind of things. Brushing teeth was a must, you know. And I remember once I caught what they call jungle rot under my arm, where the sweater, I had it on for so long, it had grown into hair. And when I took it off, it pulled the skin and hair from under my arm, so I had to wear these pads under my arm for a couple of weeks. Because and most of the guys shaved the hair in the jungle areas, and I kept my hair shaved. Like I've always worn my hair like this. I've always liked it like this. Except when I was back in the States stationed in Pax River, I couldn't wear it like this. I had to have the high and tight, you know. But I wore my hair like this in Korea, and I shaved under my arms, and, you know, in every place, and that kind of helped keep down the lice. You know, guys had lice and stuff like that. You know.
Any occasions you had any control of prisoners?
Only one time. Only one time I had some kind of control. They captured this soldier, and they brought him back in and had me and this other guy watch him for a while, and then they put him on a truck and took him away. That was the only time little guy, you know. I looked and said, "Wow, this is a little guy," you know. He looked kind of beat up, you know. But that was the only time. I mean,
now things are starting to wind down for you there, and what was the general feeling among your fellows, your fellow Marines?
By leaving Korea, jubilation.
Yeah.
Even though the war was over, when I left, the war was over. I left in March of '54. It was always that nagging feeling that something's going to happen. They'll start all over again, and I'm not going to get out of here before this mess starts again. That was the general feeling. The general feeling was, I'm not going to get out of here in time. And we had a couple of scares. I remember one night in October of '53. The war had been over. The CeaseFire was July of '53. This was October of '53. There was big scare. They ran into our tent and told us to saddle up, draw ammo, that the Chinese were making some kind of move across the Jim River. And we went up to the positions that had already been prepared. And they had about, the way the positions were made, if I remember, there was about every 10 or 20 feet there was a Marine in a trench. And we spent the night. We spent 2 nights, a night and a day in that position until they realized that the alarm was not valid. So those kind of things stayed with you until you left. And I believe I left the division there, and the division didn't come home, I think, for another year or so, if I'm correct, the whole division. But I left some good friends there. It's an experience I'll never forget.
How did you get back to the States from there?
By boat. And we hit a storm coming back. We had a storm coming back about 3 days out of Korea. We hit a storm. And we came back on the Marine Lynx. That was the name of the boat. It was an old converted tanker made into a troop ship. And boy, did she roll. She rolled. And luckily, I never got seasick. I never got seasick the whole time that I served. And then after I came back from Korea, I served in Marine Barracks in Patuxent River, Maryland for a while, which is a Marine Security Barracks. And then I went to Camp Lejeune and made the med cruise with the 2nd Marines, and then I got discharged. Well, actually, I got released from active duty, and I was assigned to the 1st Marine Reserve in the New York area, and I joined the 1st Marine Battalion in the reserve, active reserve, and finished out my 8 years with the active reserve. We went to camp every summer and had training every, so that's how I finished out. I did 4 years active duty and 4 years reserve.
And then what did you do after you were discharged?
I went to college.
Where'd you go?
I went to, oh my goodness, Fordham, and Fordham and Marymount.
And then what did you do for an occupation after?
I worked as a drug rehabilitation counselor for 25 years.
And
then I went to work for the state as a staff development specialist in drug rehabilitation.
Now, have you gone to any reunions?
Oh yes, I was one of the first original 10 guys to do the Howe Company reunion in 1991. The Howe Company 3-1 reunion in 1991. I was one of the original 10 guys. And I went to several other reunions after that. And I'm also a member of the William Dale O'Brien Marine Corps League Detachment. We do the parades, Veterans Day, Memorial Day. And I stay active in Veterans Affairs and whatnot. I really enjoyed the service. And if I could go back in today, I would.
Now, you have a lot of pictures you showed us here. Your family is all service-oriented, different branches of the service.
No one in the Marines, though. I have 9 children, and 5 of those children, 2 are on active duty now, and 3 have served and finished their time. I've had 2 daughters in the Air Force. They're out, and they're finished. My oldest son was in the Air Force. He did his service, and he's out. I have a son now in the Navy who's a chief in San Diego, and I have a son who's in the Air Force. He's a senior airman stationed in New Mexico.
Well, we certainly thank you for your service to the country.
Thank you.
And we're very glad you did this interview.
Thank you. Thank you. It was nice.